Welcome, everybody. Today we have Wisdom with us doing our Syelo tank. A little bit of a different spin from some of the tools that we've been seeing lately. Wisdom is a little bit more on the talent branding, talent insight space. We're very excited to have them come on and pitch to us and show us their product. But this is Amy and Richard's show today, so I will let them take over. All right, everyone, here's Wisdom.
Thanks, Sabrina. So I'm going to share screen and we can hop in. So hi, I'm Rich Early. I'm the Managing Director of Wisdom. And one of the things that kind of really stood out to us when we set off on this journey to build Wisdom was we knew that a strong employer brand, that is an employer brand that's well articulated, that people understand and can identify and decide whether or not it means something to them, and also means something that perhaps they are enticed by, can reduce cost per hire quite dramatically. It can reduce it by 60%. There's loads of other ancillary benefits where if your employees are also bought into it, it can reduce turnover. But knowing how to build one, actually knowing what that means, what people think of you, what they value in you, and what you're perceived as standing for is quite hard to do and often quite expensive. And what that means is we've seen a situation where millions of dollars are wasted on suboptimal campaigns that are either based on anecdotes from exit interviews or just gut feel. Things like, younger people really value remote work. Turns out they don't. Or women in the workplace, their top priority is family and flexibility. But in our data in the UK, for example, we see that that's flipped, and actually men prefer that and women are much more driven by pay. In the US, it flips the other way again. So doing things based on anecdote and gut feel isn't going to get you very far, and all that means is you're going to spend a lot of money with an agency, put adverts out there, and they're not going to work. Now, our heritage is we have a sister company called Wiser, who are a creative agency, and they set out with the goal of trying to build the kind of quality and availability of research and data in employer branding that you saw in consumer branding by hiring people from Saatchi, WPP. And so we, with that in mind, built Wisdom based on that knowledge base. Now, employer branding, as I've touched on, hasn't had that same level of investment, and we set out to solve that because none of the existing options that our research teams were trying to use actually met those requirements. So when you did a bespoke research project, you might go and do a survey or a focus group or interviews. It's super high quality. It's very targeted, but it's really expensive. You can't really repeat it in a consistent way, so you can't track it over time. You can't prove whether or not your work actually moved the dial. Then we had the alternative was like straight data, so going to things like LinkedIn and Glassdoor. Now, it's cheap, it's fast to do, but it can be quite superficial. It excludes a silent majority. It only really includes the views that are either extreme, polarized. People generally don't go online to write positive job reviews. So if there's some things can be excessively negative, even though that isn't necessarily accurate. And the consumer brand platforms were super comprehensive and really easy to use because they had been iterated on for decades. They're used to having this data, but they weren't employer brand specific. They weren't answering questions about what people wanted from work. They were more general lifestyle questions that were answered. And other EB providers are in this space that are trying to solve this problem are doing surveys, and I'll touch on how we get our data in a moment, but they often rely on things like convenience sampling. So they won't guarantee that you get a fair representation of demographics. Instead, convenience sampling means you just send surveys out, and whoever fills them in, that's your best bet because they're the easiest to reach because it's convenient. So we started building Wisdom about maybe 2 years ago someone just joined, at Wiser, our sister company, and we spun that out into a new co about 9 months ago. And that's when I joined to spin it out. Prior to that, I'd run 2 other software businesses that I'd founded and taken to exit. Now, Wisdom set out to answer these 4 questions for you. If you're trying to hire a group of people, who are they? What motivates them? What they think of you? What they think of your competitors? Where can you get their attention? What channel is it online? Where do they spend their time? And where do they look for jobs? And then once I know all of that, how do I optimally communicate with them to convince them that I'm a good place to work so they come and apply? And that means I can then suck in a larger pool of talent and make sure that we get the quality that we're looking for. Now, we've got quite a lot of clients using this already, just over 20, some really big household names on here from Comcast, KFC, McCain, Etihad in the UAE. And all of these guys now are using Wisdom to make these decisions to inform their employer brand campaigns. And they've seen some great results from that, which I'll touch on in a moment. Now, the main differentiators for us, now that we've built Wisdom and we're iterating all the time, is the data is immediately available. So you can log into it as a SaaS platform, and we combine both survey data that we update every 6 months in many geographies, US, UK, UAE, India, and so on, and combine that with scrape data. So you still get the view of what people are saying on social media and how you're presenting yourself online, but it's grounded in the slower moving views of the majority of people. I've touched on the fact that the data updates every 6 months. In addition to that, we think we've covered, as we've iterated on this for a while now and relied on the heritage of our sister company, to have a really mature KPI framework that reports for everyone. So you can start with really, really granular KPIs that might be, I want to improve our consideration. That is, if somebody saw a job advert from me, would they click on it and consider applying for just female tech talent relative to my competition in the US? Or I can be really high level and just say, I just want to make my brand awareness go up in every region that I operate in. And either of those are perfectly possible to track in Wisdom. So without further ado, I will jump into our dashboard. Does anyone have any questions before I jump in? No, I will continue. Okay. Amy, can I get a thumbs up? Cool. This is our way of checking that it shares. Okay, great. So what I'm showing you here is dummy data, but using the McCain logo, as many people will know them as either a household frozen foods provider, or also the biggest supplier of chips to people like Burger King, for example. Sorry, fries, not chips for you guys. I needed to translate that. I appreciate that, Sabrina. So most of our clients start on this page. It's kind of like an overview of your brand health from an employer brand perspective, and it follows the funnel of recruitment. So brand awareness on the left here, that is, if people saw the logo, could they tell you what industry you operated in? What thing do you actually do? What economic good do you deliver to the economy? Secondarily, we have consideration. That is, okay, I know the company, but of those people, if I saw an advert for a job, would I click on it? Would I consider applying there? And then appeal is, do I think they're a good employer? When I come to making my decision about accepting a job there, if I heard that a friend worked there, do I think they're a good place to work, that treats their employees well, that's trustworthy, that's inclusive and has happy staff? Now, once I understand that, that's great, but it can be a bit abstract. So what I want to know is, what's my position in the market? So this next tab here, benchmarking, means that where our competitors are in a specific geography, so I'm in the US here, they can select up to 3 competitors as standard. They can select more if they want to, and there's a payment model for that. And we can then track those funnel metrics against that and say, okay, your awareness against Conagra is slightly better, but you're way behind Kraft Heinz in this geography. We can see about where your consideration is, and we can start to diagnose at a population level where they might need to focus their efforts in their paid media, in their organic media, and also maybe specifically the actual copy that they put in there, because we could provide a lot of information on what sits under these. Now, this gives us a view of their top 3 competitors, but what we let people do is also explore the wider Wisdom data set. We have more and more companies that are using Wisdom, and so what we do is, in this view, allow you to see all the other companies that are in there, plus their competitors, and what you can see is who's best in class for consideration, who are the 2 people above you, who's beneath you. And if you come in here, you can scroll through a list of all the companies that are in Wisdom. Now, all the data I've showed you so far is an average of the population. So what we do is, every 6 months, we survey the general working population of a given location. And that means that we make sure that we have the right mix of ethnicities, age groups, job roles, industries, all within that. But a lot of people don't care what the general population think of them. If I'm in a niche industry, if I'm hiring for manufacturing roles, I want to know what female tech talent think. I need to filter this data down. So what we do is we offer a feature where you can come in here and you can build a talent persona. So you can apply any of these filters along here. So industry, age, experience, gender, role, and so on. And what I've done is I've pre-made a female tech talent persona here. it's showing me that I've got 106 people that have responded to surveys in that category in our last 6-month survey run, which was done in March. And what it tells us is their distribution throughout the country, the role that they're fulfilling, and most importantly, at the bottom here, we have something we call the archetype chart. Now, what this is in purple, we've shown the distribution of the audience against one of 4 personality types, a bit like a Myers-Briggs test. As part of completing a survey, we categorize people into these. And what we can see by the purple chart is that female tech talent are predominantly motivated by purpose and secondarily by a structured work environment. Now, purpose-driven people, I think purpose has been talked about a lot over the last sort of 10 years, come to work because they want to make a positive impact on the world around them. Structure-motivated people come to work for high job security, knowing where they sit in the organization and knowing where they're going. Now, what we do is we overlay that with a question that we ask people to try and identify what they think your brand stands for as an employer. And that's in the orange that you can see there. And what we can see is that for this audience, they think this brand most satisfies the mindset character type. And that is a place where you can develop new skills, innovate, and really focus on yourself and your own personal career growth. And where you have that misalignment, you have a choice to make. The first is, if there is a misalignment that is legitimate, then be aware that you are targeting a much smaller subset of this already small talent pool. So you're going to get less applications, and that helps you manage conversations with stakeholders about why you're getting less applications. But if the perception is incorrect, then you know you need to do something to change it. So you need to start to move the perception. But the question becomes, how do I move it in a way that means that people want to apply to me, and where do I say it? And that's where we come into this section of the tool where we answer these questions. So where we say it is we track the channels that people are looking on social media. So we'll find out where they apply for jobs, and this is at the general working population level. And this theme plays out throughout the tool, and you can see where certain groups over-index. We can see the female tech talent over-index on LinkedIn, unsurprisingly. But we also track where they spend their time online throughout the day. So if we want to know where to place ads to build awareness, we can think about LinkedIn, we can think about probably Instagram, maybe TikTok, looking at this for this group in the US. And then we need to know what we need to say to move the dial in a positive way. So we can look at what these people value at work, and we track 20 work priorities, and we rank them for the group going clockwise on this chart. You can then apply the filter again and see where they over-index. It looks like these people are really interested in remote work, impact at work, working for good management, working for industry leaders. They also value diversity in the workplace. Now we know why they might take a job and accept it, and some of the things we can weave into our messaging. We also want to know why they might leave their job. So we track both how many people have left their job in the last year, but also how many people say they're going to leave. These numbers are always widely disparate. The number of people who say they want to leave and then seem to never not leave means that there's probably some level of inertia. Maybe it's harder to move in the market they're in. Maybe it's because they're dissatisfied, but they haven't found something that's the right fit. But this metric is quite an interesting one. And sitting within here, we track all the reasons why they've moved. So you can start to think about the things that drive people to leave their jobs, and then think about how you might be able to play into that as part of your messaging. And once we now understand what motivates these people, why they might take a job, why they might leave a job, and where they are, we can jump back into these sections and think about, okay, how aware are these groups of our brand and what we do? Would they consider working for us? What's the appeal? We can do the same for the benchmarking. And then the last piece of the puzzle here is, okay, well, if we're showing up that way, they think we're a mindset business, we know what they value. What are we putting out on social media at the moment to give that perception? How did we arrive here? And this page here is we scrape LinkedIn and we look at what you're putting out there and what your competitors are putting out there. And we are able to tell you, okay, you're talking predominantly about ESG, but your competitors are talking about it way less. That isn't valued by this group. You are talking a lot about purpose and values. You're talking a lot about impact, and impact is all about kind of like, I guess, doing innovative work. So that might be why you're over-indexing there. And then lastly, you can say, okay, well, we know all of those things. How do I know what content's going to land with these groups? What we have here is we allow people to upload 6 pieces of content every 6 months, and then we have a secondary model where you can pay per test. And a bit like if anyone has worked in the consumer space, You can do testing for ads. We do the same thing. So we test these ads with our audiences. We can tell you which ad was most favorable with which group. So you can see here which ad was preferred by the female tech talent. You can see that the first one was much preferred to the second one. And you can also see whether or not it changed their perception of you, whether you were more appealing, whether it thought that after seeing the ads, your employees are more happy. So you start to get, in addition to kind of the impressions and likes and engagement data you might get from an A/B test, before you even spend that money, we can tell you what it's going to make people feel. And I will stop there because that's a very quick whistle-stop tour of wisdom.
Awesome. I guess from our perspective, does anybody have any questions before we kind of jump in a little bit to the tool? No questions? Not yet. Is there any other functionality? Are you going to show us some more functionality, or are we wanting to open it up on our end, Richard, Amy?
We'd like to open it up.
Awesome. I guess I'll start off. I'll kind of kick off with questions, and this is more for our group here. What if anything, because I know we have a few startup people here and kind of dispersed across the variety of recruiting, but what, if any, tools are y'all using right now for any kind of talent branding? Like, what's kind of your methodology currently? Nobody's, oh, go ahead.
I think a lot in the startup world, like there's just no budget for anything like this when it comes to small companies, and we don't have budget to be able to post most roles and sponsor most of our roles on LinkedIn or on Indeed. And so is this geared more towards enterprises? And okay, that makes a lot more sense. That's all I had.
I think the standard ones are like Built-in, Glassdoor, LinkedIn. But to Tony's point, like the bigger orgs, then they start to build out like employer branding or like talent branding or like talent attraction teams that would really own a platform like this.
That's our experience, yeah.
Yeah. And Built-in, by the way, is like crazy expensive in my opinion. So I don't know what your pricing is, but I think that like you could probably target startups if you were more competitive, because I think Built-in like obviously has made their whole platform based off of targeting startups, but then it's like stupid money.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a hot take.
Actually,
Caitlin.
I also wonder if you know, folks are to have an opinion about Glassdoor. Personally, I've seen Glassdoor decline over time. You know, when you talk to candidates, there used to be a time, maybe pre-pandemic, you know, where you'd at least hear, "Oh, I saw your rating is 3.8," and now suddenly no one even brings up Glassdoor anymore. You know, so LinkedIn primarily, and we're a mid-sized company. You know, so yes, budget is a big constraint to everyone's point. You know, Caitlin, I've not heard of Built-in, so thank you very much. But again, you brought up cost, so that's going to be a concern again. So LinkedIn has been primarily the talent branding, and of course your own website, which is another free resource where you can showcase your talent brand as much as you want to with no limitations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've heard that feedback as well, that people aren't as invested in Glassdoor, but they are thinking about LinkedIn a lot in the consideration stage. So for example, maybe someone's going to interview and they use your LinkedIn page for research, and really that's where they might be comparing what they see on your LinkedIn to what they see on, you know, the other company, maybe your competitor that they're also interviewing for, which is part of the reason why we developed the social listening page as well. And it's worth pointing out, we definitely appreciate that budgets an issue no matter what size of company you work for. It's always difficult. So we do have different packages as well where we can kind of add on maybe just the social listening and the market insights to make something that's, you know, helps you start thinking about employer brand, but it isn't going to like blow your whole budget away.
I think I kind of wanted to gather from the group like what they're currently using, because again, I think especially lately, that's kind of hasn't been the main thing that's on everybody's mind right now, right? Like talent branding hasn't been the main thing. But I do think that, you know, everyone knows this, recruiting is very cyclical, and eventually it will be again. Like you're going to have to struggle to get great candidates. It always turns back around. Like that's just the way recruiting is. And I personally haven't used, like, I do remember when Glassdoor was super popular to the point where we were getting in trouble because our boss was like, hey, our Glassdoor reviews are bad. Like, we got to fix this. What are we going to do? But people don't really care about that anymore because it has become a place where it's like, okay, if you go on Glassdoor, the majority of the time it's going to be negative. So people kind of take it with a grain of salt. I guess from y'all's perspective at Wisdom, are y'all thinking about like integrating with career pages? Because that could be maybe something you look into, because I think that's the other thing, right? A lot of times, especially for startups, the career page lands on the recruiter. And I personally am like, I don't know anything about marketing. Like, I don't know how to market this. Like, I can do my best, but that's not really what I've been trained to do. So something like this would be helpful for me. Like, okay, if I kind of have like a template or know what angle to go about, you know, with content and marketing, that would be easier. So that could definitely be something like maybe a spin for y'all. I don't know if you've been thinking about that, but
we've been thinking about integrating with them from like an analytics perspective, so you could track all the way through from a campaign to like who clicked on the page, and then you could say, well, this ad was worth it because this person of this profile saw the ad, clicked through, came to the careers page. We could also monitor things like traffic after you post things. So once you've posted it, did traffic spike? So you could prove some ROI there as well, and kind of try to bring all that data together. That's definitely something we've kind of got on our roadmap, is trying to bring all these disparate data sources through the talent pipeline into one place. The only barrier we've come up against is it seems to kind of stop the ability to access data very easily at that point. So you get to the careers site and that's normally kind of easy, but then the ATS is like pretty nightmarish to integrate with. And unless you like are able to get the configuration team that did the work with the ATS, like Workday, to work with you, it becomes quite tricky to do much more than that.
so this is more like I guess maybe it would be helpful, because I know you kind of showed us what the dashboard and platform look like, but maybe it would be helpful to kind of see, like if this is a standalone, you're basically kind of creating your own career page through your platform, right?
Well, you are using it to decide what you put on your career page, what you put on your socials, where you post it, and what the messaging would be. So in the content testing section that I showed just now, I'll just share screen. In here, you can test any kind of content. So some of our clients, what they do is they test sections of their career site in here rather than videos or images. It just so happens that McCain shoot a lot of films, so they test films here, which is why we've got them. But they test anything from like Instagram posts through to like new career site copy to job descriptions if they're doing like volume contingent hiring. We work with a few retailers, so that's one reason. Hey, Caitlin.
What's been like the biggest move of the needle that you guys have seen? Like in some of the companies that you've worked with, what has been like your most drastic success story? Because like I'm just looking at the demo page, like 0.6%, like, okay, like that's not really impactful. So what's been your like biggest swing?
Yeah, I can touch on that here. So this is a McCain case study. So McCain approached us because they wanted to run a large scale like manufacturing campaign to hire manufacturing talent. It started in the north of England, but we now work with them across Canada, US, UK, India, all the way to Australia, because it worked pretty well. And their main challenge was they didn't understand why, as a big household brand in an area with loads of other manufacturing workers and factories, why they weren't winning, why they weren't getting talent. And they just didn't get it. They just were like, well, we're a household name. Everyone knows us. We've got a good reputation. This doesn't make sense. And like in the UK, pretty much everyone you would ask on the street would know this brand. Now, when we looked at the data, we ran a first study for them in Wisdom. The thing we started to realize was people in those roles, in blue collar roles in that location, were really motivated by purpose, not by security. And their whole thing was, we're a really like secure place to work. We've been around for years. We're a family-owned business. We're not going anywhere. And that was a surprise to them. But they were also perceived as a job security business. So the first thing to do was kind of move that messaging. And then based on the other data points I touched on earlier, they came up with a campaign with an agency using that data called The Makers, which is all about like farm to table. So how we own farms, operate them all the way through to the factory, and how we have a positive impact on our community. And we watched cost per hire plummet by like 60% because they made sure that that message was hammered throughout the whole recruitment process, from the social posts all the way through to the recruitment and onboarding. It was like, you're going to be part of your community, you're going to be feeding people, there's going to be food put on the table that you had a hand in making. And that really changed things for them. So after that working, they then rolled us out to 7 geographies, which has been great. So we work with them kind of everywhere now. The other thing is, before they used us, they put quite a lot of content out on socials that kind of didn't go anywhere, but they spent quite a lot of money on paid media spend. So like, and that was tricky for them because they got super low click-through rates. And based on the tweaks they made, they ran a campaign afterwards based on the data from them, and we doubled their click-through rates, which was great. So we basically halved their media spend. And then the other thing was they saw their consideration soar. So consideration was up about 11% in the first 6-month period we worked with them. It's only gone up since then as they've kept making tweaks based on how the market's moved. But they're probably one of our great success stories. We've had a kind of similar journey with Comcast and a few of the businesses they own as well. So that's the kind of metrics we like to think we change. We do 2 things really. We make sure you get the most out of the budget you are going to spend, so you squeeze every dollar out of it. But also we try to reduce that cost per hire, so you stop people dropping out. You make sure that people who do apply actually know what they're applying for up front.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, I think from my perspective as well, what I find really interesting is just how big those percentage changes can differ based on the different talent persona. So when you're thinking maybe like from a startup perspective, what performs well with software engineers will be so vastly different to what performs well with like good sales hires. And that's one way where you can kind of think about, okay, do I want to create 2 separate bits of messaging for each of those different talent groups? Do I want to find something that works in the middle? Because yeah, we might see something get like an 83% score with tech workers, and it could be someone's like career page or their main EVP messaging, but it actually just really doesn't perform well with commercial hires.
Mm-hmm.
So they use those insights as well. It can be anything like a 20% difference sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, so the enterprise target makes sense because it's almost like you need to find a team that's saying like, hey, we want to increase, to your whole point, like women in engineering, or yeah, okay.
Yeah, or like young workers if they have an aged sort of workforce issue. So maybe their workforce is kind of environment and they're watching themselves walk off a cliff edge. That can be a challenge too for a few logistics businesses we work with as well.
Have y'all considered, the way that I look at it too, and I think like, I know a lot of companies aim for enterprise, but honestly, as a startup, like would probably be more valuable, to be completely honest, because like startup recruiting is basically you're trying to convince somebody to come work for a company that they've never heard of. And it's hard sometimes. Like if nobody knows who you are, there's 1,000 different startups. So to me, I think it would be honestly more helpful to a startup. Like most people know what enterprise companies are and what they do. Have you like done a case study with the startup before, or have you kind of tried that route? And I guess what was that like for y'all?
So we haven't for the time being. I used to work at HR tech startup, so I can definitely kind of understand that awareness problem and how much of a struggle that is. But that definitely was why we created that those different package options, because I think really, like you say, the perception data, if your awareness is quite low, it might not be the best fit for you, but you will really benefit from that market insights page. So let's say you want to create a job description that's going to really stand out in the crowd. You can use that work priorities filter to make sure that yours is more appealing than others. Also with that social listening, data, like I mentioned. If someone's landing on your LinkedIn page to do research for your job interview, how can you use that to really sell your organization? Like, you've got them in the funnel, and now you need to make sure they choose you as an employer instead of Google, instead of Meta. And how can you use that as a real differentiator early on in the process? So definitely that option is designed to help startups who have less budget, but also really do need those insights more than enterprise companies, because you probably don't have as much access on LinkedIn because that's really expensive. You might not have as much access on Glassdoor as well. But we are aware that obviously today we are speaking to mainly people from startup communities, and you might have worked at like enterprise companies in the past or bigger companies. So we do have a couple of different offers just like exclusively for the Syelo community. So the first one is, if any of this sounds interesting and you think this is great, but it might not be quite right for our company at this stage now, we do run a referral scheme. So if you know anyone you want to introduce us, and if they do set up a partnership, we'll offer 4 free rounds of content testing. So what that looks like is we can take any piece of content, provided it's less than a minute long, but it could be your careers page, it could be a job description, and we'll do qualitative surveys with 50 respondents, and that could be all software engineers in San Francisco, it could be all sales hires in Michigan, really can be whatever you want. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of value you could get from that data. And we'll run four of those studies for you, which is worth about $6,000 roughly. So I'm sure Sabrina and the Syelo Tank can share our information afterwards. And if you do have anyone that you want to connect us to, potential just to get some nice free content testing in there and kind of validate that what you're working on is heading in the right direction, or if there are some small like changes that you can make, we'll share that qualitative feedback and we'll kind of put it into 5 key themes so you can identify what the main areas that you want to change are. In the past, people have found that really useful to make a case for budget. It's quite difficult to try and convince a CFO of why recruitment marketing is really important. But if you have that feedback there that, you know, proves, okay, this is actually working well, we need to scale it up, or this is what we need to change and why we need to invest more money in making it look a bit more slick, it can really help those conversations as well.
I would just add on Sabrina's point, thanks Amy, I mean, the startup point, I would say we haven't overlooked, but we've toyed with like an entry-level tier that's stripped back that we can deliver at a price point that works for startups, or like maybe not true startups, but scale-ups, people who are kind of beyond the first like seed stage and are looking to actually start hiring. And I think the unknown for me is what's it worth to them? Would they pay $50 a month? Is that like a good thing? Would that help people? Would it be $100 a month? And then I know what to scope into it to make it deliverable for that. But that's the thing I think we're not sure of, is in that sphere, how thin are the budgets? Because we've got to make sure you get an actual ROI. So if we strip it back too much, it becomes too basic and not any good. If we go too far, it becomes too complex. And I think we just haven't kind of worked out what the boundaries are of a tier like that. We've been very like enterprise focused because those I guess tickets have kind of helped us get to cash flow positive, and now we're like, what do we do next?
Yeah, I guess this is a good time to kind of feel free to ask the group questions as well. Like whatever questions you think would be helpful to you guys. We've got people here that have done startups, have done everything in between enterprise. So feel free to ask this group questions as well.
Cool. Does anyone have any views on the positioning I laid out? Do they think there's anything that's like, oh, that's not quite right? I didn't really see that as a problem. And there's a bigger problem we're like missing.
I can comment on pricing if that's of any value. I mean, bulk of my career has been small to mid-sized companies, and I think a lot of times, and maybe sounding a little biased because budgets are limited. So I think for most SMBs and when most tech, HR tech or recruiting tech vendors price, if you look at the value chain of from where the candidate enters a funnel all the way to you hire someone, I think pricing should reflect the value that you're providing in that value chain, which is super important. So the way I look at it is if someone gets hired, and if you look at, I also came from the agency world, so we used to calculate everything based on that, right? 20% fee on an average on a candidate salary. So $150,000 salary, 30K is what a fee costs. Where do you find yourself in the value chain? If it's early on, so think about 30K as the end of the spectrum, you're standing right here. So I personally think, and back to what Sabrina said, I said there's huge value. Again, one of the things that I struggled with from an SMB point is everyone knows Meta, everyone knows Google, everyone knows all the big names, but we're trying to still build a brand name. So if you have a way to attract the SMB space and price it based on a little bit of kind of the example that I shared, I think definitely it's a major conversation starter at that point. Number two, I'll just add, I know, Amy, you kind of alluded towards that a little bit by the referral model. If we introduce you, there'll be there's a value attached to it. I don't know if you're offering, and I apologize, I was a few minutes behind on the call. I don't know if your offering does provide like a certain trial period that does not cost a startup anything, so they see value. So if you look at all of this together, that might give you some story, because as everyone says, proof is in the pudding. So if you make it silly to a point where, oh my God, first 15 days, I don't know, you guys will have to do the math on your numbers, is free and test it out. Here's what it shows. Then you'll make someone fall in love a little more with a tool like that. So those are just a couple points to just bring up. And I think that's one area a lot of recruiting tech and HR tech companies miss out by not providing that, you know what, my work will speak for itself. Try me out. So those are the few things I'll just add.
And that also just helps us go to the founder or CFO and be like, hey, we did it for 30 days. We saw an increase in inbounds in this. We saw an increase in offer acceptance in this. Like, this is a no-brainer. It's, whatever, $500 a month. Like, we'd be silly not to do it. It's super hard. And like Richard, as my first question was like, what are the metrics? It's super hard to look at numbers and believe them. So like the ability to test or just like more case studies just provide like a little bit more confidence, because I think all of us on this call and any like head of talent, head of people is so critical and like skeptical of anything that's trying to make our lives easier. So like demos are just great ways to get the hook.
Yeah. Maybe you think that
I'll just add to Caitlin's one really quick point. I cannot agree more on that. Like, there have been tools we purchase, overpromise, underdeliver. For me now, I'm like super gun shy to even think of investing a penny, leave aside thousands of dollars in any tool. Nothing against you guys. I'm just making a general statement. Yeah. I'm not speaking on behalf of the community. I'm just like, my perception, Caitlin, mirrors what you just said, right? It's really hard. We fight for every dollar to spend it's our neck on the line. And if the tool does not pay off, well, guess what? Good luck. You're not going to get anything for the next foreseeable future. So I agree with you on that, Caitlin.
Yeah, that's fair. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, being a startup founder a few times around now, I wouldn't pay if I didn't get the trial. So I'm aware. Amy always knows my first question is, does it have a free trial before I approve anything?
Yeah, it's a good point, and it's definitely something for us to consider. How can we prove value to smaller teams before you commit? Because budget is always the number one conversation.
Yeah, I think on that note, so some of us have kind of started saying like, okay, well, we're only paying for this one thing, so that's what we have budget for, and we can't afford to kind of spread our message everywhere. I think one of the things that could be an interesting like entry-level offering or an idea is kind of giving maybe not a super narrow, bespoke analysis or here's data on this particular profile you're going after, but kind of being able to segment by industry or geo and say, hey, these are some suggested messaging tactics that might work. Here's a couple of ways you can maybe frame this, like kind of almost giving more like a entry kind of guidance to people who are doing 20 different things in their day. I would pay a lower entry price just to have kind of like a monthly check-in analysis recap. And by the way, next month, why don't you try some of this like messaging or this particular targeting or something like that. Just an idea. I know that's a little bit off track from what you guys had asked, but in my mind, as I was listening, thinking through it, like that would be something that would be really valuable to me.
Interesting. I mean, things like that are really helpful feedback for us, though, right? So,
Yeah.
I like to hear these things and then digest them and think about where it would sit in a roadmap. So, no, I think no requests or suggestion like that is a bad one if other people have them.
Richard, Amy, any other questions specifically for this group?
No, I don't think so. I just signpost again. If you do fancy some free content testing, let Sabrina know, and Amy will arrange.
Yes, we will definitely share all of y'all's information. Thank you so much. If anyone in the group wants to reach out as well, feel free to. I know sometimes it's sometimes hard to give feedback live and with the group. So feel free to DM me. I can send it over. We'll share information as well. But thank you all so much for joining today. Richard, Amy, we really appreciate it. We'll be sharing your information. If anyone reaches out about specifically using Wisdom or has feedback for y'all, we'll be able to share that with you guys as well.
Amazing. Thank you for arranging, Sabrina, and thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.